Thank you, Dori. So I'd just like my next set of questions will just go to the Director General of Nimasa. Thank you very much, Dr. Jamoh, for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you. So the next set of questions are going to be about the CVFF. Sir Peter touched on this, and we would like you to throw some more light on the role of Nimasa with respect to the CVFF. We've heard of the CVFF for so many years. Nimasa has become the proverbial golden goose, and the golden egg is the fund. So we would want to ask, as the chairman of the committee set up by the Minister of Transport, in your capacity as a DG, the committee was set up to review the CVFF guidelines of 2006. Have there been any developments from the committee in terms of the review? What are we to expect? Are there any key highlights, or has any progress been made?
All right, thank you very much, moderator. Let me start by acknowledging and appreciating each and every member of this platform. I am quite happy and glad to be with you, and want to state that Funke SAN, you are trying to ease my burden of the issue of ship financing in Nigeria. There is no sector can just live like that, exposed without any kind of assistance or support. So your ability to get people together, especially lawyers, I think is giving me a lot of milestone and a voice to my supervisors and to the government to fast track the issue of ship financing in Nigeria. I would also like to thank the chairman, Seni Adewu, SAN, also for his, the opening remark was apt, and he was straight to the point of what we can, what we expect. Emeka Indo has been with us for a lot of time, for a long time. He has been very supportive to the industry and to the plea of the members of the shipping groups in terms of ship financing and ownership. Sir Peter made a lot of background studies or background preambles in terms of ship financing history in Nigeria. But let me throw more light a little bit. The Nimasa's intervention on ship acquisition and shipbuilding came first in 1993 to 1994, where the government introduced a policy of ship acquisition and shipbuilding fund. And they directed the then National Maritime Authority to set aside funds from the income accrued of the 3% levy generated from the ship owners on the freight, on gross freight earned by ship owners. So sometimes in 1996, we started the disbursement of this ship acquisition and shipbuilding funds. And after disbursing the entire money, what we expect at that time was for the beneficiaries to pay the loan collected and continue to add a kind of subvention by the government to use the funds as a revolving fund, so that day in, day out, we have this money circulating to the ship owners, thereby increasing fleet expansion in the country. But unfortunately, you know, the way we behave in third world country, I don't want to say Nigeria alone, most of the countries are the same. The beneficiary tried to use the money as a national cake, believing that they have received their own share. So most of them reneged in payment. We ended up in going to court. As I'm talking to you, between 1996 till date, we still have cases in court of those people who benefited from such gesture and they refused to pay the money. I think from my record, I still have about 8 companies with huge amount of money unpaid. Some of them, they said they bought rickety buckets ships because the money given to them wasn't enough for them to buy a very good and viable ships. And some of them, they told us that the vessel sank into the ocean. They couldn't see the vessels. I am giving this history to understand the enormity of what the CVFF is costing now before I get to the CVFF issue. So at the end of the day, government suspended action on CVFF. On ship acquisition and shipbuilding fund because of such defaulters. Then we continue our journey up to 2003, trying to see how we can recover those funds. And in 2003, the enactment of the Cabotage Act came. When it came with provision of ship acquisition and shipbuilding fund. Sir Peter made mention that we reneged in payment, but no, we didn't renege in payment. The ship acquisition, the Cabotage Vessel Financing Fund, popularly known as CVFF, is a fund set aside to replace the issue of ship acquisition and shipbuilding fund. And given the history and experiences we gather from the disbursement of ship acquisition and shipbuilding fund, a lot of stringent measures has been put in place for the Cabotage Vessel Financing Fund, CVFF. And the National Assembly, after enactment of the Act, they now provided a guideline for the disbursement of such fund. And they introduced what we call primary lending institutions. These primary lending institutions, they are the banks that are supposed to contribute their own portion to the loan we are going to give to the ship owners. The guidelines provide that the potential beneficiary will provide 50% equity contribution of the total sum of the vessel, and then the bank will have to provide 35%, and then the owner will provide 15%. So making 100% of the entire sum. If you take 50% for the Nimasa, and then 35% by the bank, and then 15% for the owner. So time after time, for the fear of going to the EFCC, for the fear of arrest, chief executives try to be a little bit cautious and careful in trying to see how they can disburse this fund, number one. Number two, from the experience of ship acquisition and shipbuilding, where the then National Maritime Authority decided to appraise applications of the beneficiary, approved the application of the beneficiaries, disbursed the applications of the beneficiary without recourse to financial guidelines and regulations in giving or granting loans. Now we said, okay, we are going to hands off. We are not ready to take a kind of risk that we used to take or we took during the NMA or ship acquisition and shipbuilding era. So we now transfer the liability to primary lending institution as stated in the guidelines. Now, when the present government came in, they now directed the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency to transfer the entire accrued sum of CVFF to TSA. So transferring this fund to TSA from the primary lending institution, that is from the commercial bank to central bank, makes things worse and difficult. Why? Because the guidelines say that the commercial bank or primary lending institution should provide 50% equity share, while the Nimasa should provide 50% equity share, while the primary lending institution, that is the commercial bank, providing 35%, and then they will have to guarantee us the 50% Nimasa given. The commercial bank will have to guarantee that 50%. So in a nutshell, the commercial bank, they are taking the responsibility of 85% in terms of the loan. Only 15% comes from the ship owner. And now we transfer the money to the Treasury single account, that's TSA, in central bank. So in so doing, the primary lending institution, the commercial bank, drew back. They said, look, we are not going to be involved because we don't have this fund with us. The 50% you promised us is not with us. And then the 35% we are going to provide, we need a collateral. So this is what makes the disbursement of CVFF more complex than we ever expected. So sometimes in November, the present Honorable Minister of Transport wrote to Mr. President seeking his approval to disburse this fund. And approval was granted. That's in November this year. So, Sir Peter, I want to assure you that we didn't renege. It's because of this complex nature. So, when the approval was given, we were confronted again with the problem of how do we disburse the fund? Shall we go through the central bank after assessing the beneficiary, then we ask central bank to disburse the fund directly to the beneficiary? That cannot be possible because the primary lending institution would like to have the collateral. So sometimes in January this year, having studied all this problem, the Honorable Minister of Transportation gathered the stakeholders and advised them that, okay, we will have to look into the bottlenecks and the problem caused by the guidelines and see how we can simplify the access to this fund. So in so doing, he now inaugurated a committee chaired by my good self to look into the way and manner we will review the guidelines, and the review must be within the provisions of the Cabotage Act of 2003. Now, in the review, this will directly now address your own question, that the position of CVFF and where are we now. Where we are now is that, you know, the lockdown crippled almost everything in terms of business in all the country. So the challenges of collecting contributions from the members came up. But I want to assure you, as I'm talking to you, we have finished collecting over 70% of the contribution of the memberships. So the review now had to head towards striking a balance between the guidelines and the watertight areas to ensure ease of payment. Before joining you, I sat down with the Executive Director, Cabotage and Maritime Labor Services, who is the man responsible of supervising the disbursement, and we drew certain advice to the Honorable Minister on the way forward so that we can move these funds to the primary lending institution in order to have seamless disbursement of this fund within the next few months after the appraisal of the presidential approval, and to ensure that we get the funds out from the central bank TSA account to the designated primary lending institution. So this is where we are now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jamoh, for throwing light on what's happening in the committee. I just want to move quickly to the next question. We understand that Nimasa and the NCDMB, Nigerian Content Development Monitoring Board, have entered into an MOU for the development of local tonnage. Does the said MOU include any element of ship financing?
Oh, of course, yes. The essence of our collaboration with the NCDC, with the Nigerian Content Development Management Board, is to stimulate growth of the shipping industry, of the domestic fleet, to service the oil and gas sector in line with the objectives of the Cabotage Act 2003. We worked with them in categorization of vessel requirement for the Nigerian oil and gas industry, and how to develop the necessary indigenous capacity to meet the need of the sector locally. A high percentage of the cabotage operations is providing logistics to the oil and gas industry through the use of different types of service vessels. That is why the CVFF devotes a reasonable percentage of funds to acquire specialized vessels needed in that sector. So this is the crack of the MOU between the Nimasa and the Nigerian Content Development Management Board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So, Doyin, would you like to take the next round?
Thank you very much, Dr. Jamoh. I have just one last question for you. It's always a privilege to have the opportunity to speak with you and allow you to light on this. I know we currently have over 206 participants. Looking into their names, they're mostly ship owners, practitioners in industry, who are very happy as well that you are here to throw light on these issues that you just mentioned. My last question at this point in time will be to ask you essentially, what is your vision for the industry? I know you touched upon the CVFF. Apart from the CVFF, what else is Nimasa doing or looking to do with the sister agencies with a view to resolving the problems of ship owners? Financing is an element of their needs to acquire assets, to develop cabotage. So are you looking at issues of customs duty, VAT, TIP that Dr. Peter Alonafe mentioned? Because just to give some clarity and background to those that are not familiar with the issues, some vessels come in on temporary importation permit. That means they're not paying for duty, and they provide some kind of bank bond to allow them come into Nigeria. Whilst Nigerian ship owners cannot take TIPs because the law for TIP requires them to be fully owned Nigerian companies, and so they can't really take advantage of that. So they are bound to pay duty, and you're having duty of 5–10%. That's already added cost on financing. Is there anything you can let us know that what you're doing in that regard, some kind of fiscal incentives or collaboration with other agencies? Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Doyin. I think this is the area where not only Nimasa, the entire stakeholders should come in. If you look at the manufacturing sector over the years, they usually enjoy certain privileges in terms of policy and funding. If you look at aviation industry, they also enjoy similar gesture. Today, we are looking at the agriculture. The government focus more on agriculture, a lot of incentives, a lot of policies, a lot of interventions has been coming on their way. Sometimes if I sit down, I look at my industry like we are left alone because we cannot boast on any kind of subvention or support of like manner. I think this is because the industry, they are yet to come together and pool their strengths to see that favorable policies is being put in place to address some of the major issues. Such issues include like waivers on custom duty. If you look at the cost of payment of custom duty and VAT alone, can be able to procure some small crafts for fishing and other things like that. So if we can look at that, and the issue of spare parts of ships, you see, there was a time I look at the aviation industry where government need to come on and see how they can assist the aviation industry in acquisition of spare parts and other things. But we are yet to get this. All this I mentioned in my book, Harnessing the Nigerian Maritime Assets, which I try to highlight where and how we can be able to address this. So my dream, as you ask my visions and other things, is to make the ship acquisition less stressful for the ship owners and ship financing attractive for the banks and other financial services sectors players through the following. 1, incentives for ship owners. So we have to look for incentives in terms of the physical incentives should include the custom and import duty waiver or reduction, as well as VAT. We also have to look at the monetary aspect, the lower interest rate, which I think Sir Peter also mentioned during his presentation, and lower cost of borrowing, foreign exchange concessions when necessary, in form of subsidy. Whenever they are going to import, their vessels or their spare parts, or the shipbuilding industry also, in terms of parts for constructing the vessels, they should be able to enjoy certain incentives in terms of foreign exchange. For the banks, the agency, I want to believe that the agency is doing much on this. We would like to ensure that charge, lien or mortgage registers to ensure the loan against the vessel is preserved and not prejudiced. We will also have to look at the increase in business patronage for banks by the agency. You see, the banks also, as mentioned by Sir Peter, you can imagine when you enter our banks, you start to count how many of them have shipping decks. You know, shipping is an international business. What obtained in Nigeria is what obtained in UK, in Singapore, in Switzerland, and every other thing. So we must do the same. We must do alike. Therefore, training and retraining staff on the issue of shipping itself and ship financing itself and the shipping business, commercial shipping itself, must be done by professionals. It's not enough for you to go and acquire BSc Business Administration or Masters or PhD to say that you know how to do shipping. No, no, no. You have to understand the rudiments and the practical aspect of the shipping. So we must see and encourage the banks, you know, practicing ship financing. And that is one key important issue that Peter mentioned. You know, in Nigeria, we always like, the quick profit syndrome. You want to invest 10 million today and get 14 million naira maybe within the next 3, 4, 5 months. You know, there is no how you can repay loan of ship less than 10 to 25 years. You understand? So we must understand the patience it takes for us to repay loans on the issues of ship loans. And additionally, there are areas that I need to touch. When I was given the background of what fails the ship acquisition and shipbuilding fund, I made mention that one of the beneficiaries mentioned that he bought a Rekete bucket. It sounds funny, but it may be correct. When you are collecting loan for acquisition of ship, you must make sure that the ship, if you are buying a second hand, it has a lifespan that can endure and repay that particular loan. Because it's like a car. You buy a brand new car, you put it into use, you are going, enjoying yourself from Lagos to Kano, from Lagos to Enugu. By the time 6 months, 1 year, it will start to ask you, pay me this, okay, so that for maintenance. So if you buy old car, before you know, all the money you save, the car will take it back. The same thing with ship. So shipping is a professional area and professional angle that banks need to put in, to place a desk with the professionals well-trained to look at the rudiments of what it takes a shipping business to succeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your questions, sir. Kashima, over to you, please.